major step forward because it incorporates the idea that in memory you can't be selective, and in memory you need to include everybody in that particular sort of process, in a process such as this. This, of course, is a controversial area, but it is one where the government took a decision, and it is a decision that has been generally sort of received well by people 100 years after the revolution. Now, in that context, I want to talk a little bit about the revolution itself, and then go on, if I have time, and may not, about the role of the Catholic Church in the complex series of events that occurred leading up to and following the rising on Easter Monday, 1916. The 1916 revolution, and I call it that deliberately, has cast a long historical shadow and has been studied by many revolutionary leaders in different parts of the world as an event which helped secure independence for a nation both within the British Empire and within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. And one of the points that needs to be stressed is that the 1916 Rising occurred within the United Kingdom. And of course, it set a headline for revolutionary movements throughout the British Empire. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why the repression in 1916 was so severe, so austere, and so draconian. But while revolutionary strategists throughout the decades studied the logistics of the Irish Revolution, there was a fashion in Ireland in the 1970s and 80s, particularly with the backdrop of the conflict in Northern Ireland and the obscene use of violence in that process. There was a tendency among the historical profession in Ireland to view, or at least some members of the historical profession, to review the 1916 Rising as the work of academics, dramatists, literati. In other words, the work of a small group, an unrepresented group, and these were amateurs in the field of forging a revolution. The Easter Rising, if one looks at some of the literature from the 70s and the 80s, was doomed to failure, was presented in the literature as little more than a street theatre, hardly a street theatre where the Abbey Theatre, which is our national theatre, but then sort of an important, I suppose, instrument of conscientisation in the decade and a half before the Rising, that really the 1960 Rising was an extension of the theatre and the drama that was characterised the Gaelic revival of the last decade of the 19th century, the first decade of the 20th century. So the 1960 Rising was really Lady Gregory, one of the founders of the Abbey Theatre, and her work. In other words, what these leaders were doing were dramatising, were engaged in some sort of sacred drama. And more recently, a historian wrote that it was really the Abbey Theatre and Lady Gregory with Guns and Roses, and if you throw in other Irish groups, you get an idea of some of the ways in which the revolution of 1916 was trivialized to some extent by historians in the 70s and in the 80s. It is true that once Professor Owen MacNeill, Commander-in-Chief of the Irish Volunteers, successfully issued a countermanding order calling off general manoeuvres throughout the country on Easter Sunday 1916. So the plan was to have a general manoeuvre of the Irish Volunteers, and I'll explain who they were in a moment, on Easter Sunday 1916. And that general manoeuvre, and manoeuvres occurred every weekend, sort of with that group, would then turn into a revolution, and some 15,000 volunteers from all over the country would take part in the plan to hold sectors of Dublin against the British for as long as possible. Now, once the countermanding order was issued on Easter Sunday 1916 by Owen McNeely, who was not against revolution, but was against offensive violence, he preferred to think about a strategy, or at least helped with strategy, that if you were attacked, then you could respond. But he did not agree with offensive violence, and that's why he called off the revolution, which was only partially successful, but the revolution continued irrespective of his countermanding order. I mean, that changed the scale of the revolution on Easter Sunday, 1916, that countermanding order. And things looked bleak for those who chose to defy McNeill and rise on Easter Sunday, or at least on Easter Monday, because they postponed the revolution for one day, irrespective of the consequences for themselves. And one of the leaders of the rising on Easter Monday, James Connolly, a revolutionary socialist who had thrown his lot in with Irish nationalists, and was prepared to take his Irish Citizen Army, which was another armed group, formed in 1913 after the Great Lockout, a great strike that occurred, and the 404 employers knocked out their workers and virtually starved them into submission. And together with the Great War, which I'll talk about, with the First World War, James Connolly's perspective changed, and instead of seeking revolution through a syndicalist path, he threw in his lot with the Irish nationalists and supported the idea of insurgency. He, on Easter Monday 1916, said that we are going out to be slaughtered. And given the scaled-down size of the revolution, that might have been sort of 15,000 people in Dublin, 15,000 armed men and women in Dublin. You had a few hundred, you had much smaller number, and he was right to predict that they were going out to be slaughtered. I think that was on Easter Monday 1916 a realistic appraisal of where things stood that morning. But it was not the revolution that Connolly had signed up to support, or the one he had agreed to take part in, because what had been envisaged on Easter Sunday 1916 was a much more extensive revolution and a much greater threat to the British presence in Ireland. Connolly's slogan, "We serve neither king nor Kaiser," was placed in a banner over the Liberty Hall, and that was his response to the First World War and to Irish involvement in the First World War. But Connolly sort of was clearly from a military background. He had served in the British Army in the 1890s before coming to Ireland. He was born in Scotland, and he had sort of a military experience, so he knew full well that on Easter Monday 1916, with the scaled-down version of the rising that was about to take place, that they were indeed going out to be slaughtered. But Connolly would never have joined a revolution he thought was amateurish and exclusively in the hands of poets, academics, and dramatists. There is, of course, a presupposition here that poets, dramatists, and authors are incapable of planning sort of practical events such as revolution, which was not the case in the Irish context, because among the more advanced strategists for revolution were the poets, the dramatists, and the writers. The revolution that Connolly had joined in early 1916, he was kidnapped by some of the advanced nationalists and given a seminar on revolution, and as a consequence he joined the revolutionary movement. And that is, he joined the conspiracy to establish to bring about a revolution. Connolly was one of the best prepared, at least this was, from Connolly's point of view, one of the best prepared and best led revolutions in Irish history, albeit part of a tradition that was a series of failed revolutions. 1798, 1803, 1848, 1867, and now 1916. All of the previous revolutions were of little, they had significance, but they had no dramatic sort of, they were not a dramatic challenge to the British presence in Ireland. The revolution of 1916 had been planned by the Irish Republican Brotherhood. The Irish Republican Brotherhood were a secret oath-bound organisation, and they were the driving force, the organisers of the revolution. And the leader of the Irish Republican Brotherhood from 1907 was a man called Thomas Clarke, who had served 15 years in jail, 15 years penal servitude for his revolutionary actions in the earlier part of the 19th century. He had emigrated to the United States after he was released from jail, and there he involved himself in a conspiracy to generate a revolution, bring about a revolution in this generation. So there was a sense that you would betray the Irish nationalist cause among the leaders if, in fact, you did not take advantage of the situation and rise. You did not want to sort of besmirch the reputation of this generation of nationalists, of radical revolutionary nationalists, by simply sitting back and not taking action. So Clarke was sent back from the United States by the IRB. Thomas DuBois was the leader of the IRB in the United States, and Clarke's job was made all the easier by the context in which he found, or at least the context in which he arrived in Ireland, where there had been this Celtic revival in the latter part of the 1890s and the early 20th century, and you had a plethora of societies and organisations under the cloak of these organisations, Clarke and the IRB could work in unobserved. In other words, the IRB could infiltrate the Gaelic Athletic Association, the sporting organisation. It could infiltrate the Gaelic League, which was the organisation for the advancement of the Irish language. It could infiltrate small political bodies like Sinn Féin, the Irish Ireland movement, the trade union movement, the women's organisations, which were very forceful and very strong, and the suffragette movement was very strong in Ireland in the first decade of the 20th century. So Clarke had a number of front organisations which he could infiltrate, and he could mobilise and then pick recruits to join the IRB and to join the revolutionary movement. Now, I don't have an opportunity here to develop my ideas regarding the role of women in the Irish Revolution, but I would argue, if I had time, that many of the women radicalised the men rather than vice versa. That the women's movements were indeed very radical, very advanced in terms of the women's rights, suffragettes, etc. But they've organised an organisation later on called Common Mon, which was a militant, revolutionary, armed organisation, and they took part in the 1916 Rising in a very advanced way. For example, Eamon de Valera was radicalised by his wife rather than vice versa, Sinead O'Flanagan, who was his teacher in the Gaelic League, and she was a much more advanced nationalist than de Valera, and Eamon de Valera, who latterly became, a long-time sort of political leader of an independent Ireland and later president of Ireland. But she radicalised him, I believe, rather than he radicalised her. I don't have an opportunity to look at the role of women religious in the conflict, except if I have time I'll go back and deal with one or two prominent Irish nuns who were revolutionaries. In my view, the planning, and contrary to the thinking of some of the historians in the 70s and 80s, the planning of the 1916 Rising had all the following characteristics. There was idealism, there was courage, there was unselfishness, and then there was on the other side intrigue, conspiracy, secrecy, deception, betrayal, kidnapping, and high Machiavellianism. By 1916, the IRB had been thoroughly reorganized. A new generation had been recruited to its tightly knit ranks. The IRB had infiltrated various cultural and political and paramilitary organizations, particularly the Irish Volunteers, which were founded in 1913. And really, if I could just take a moment here to explain that prior to the 1916 Rising, Ireland was an armed camp in many ways, and different organizations developed or created sort of paramilitary forces. In the north, you had the Unionists, who were organized into the Ulster Volunteer Force, armed, well armed, having brought in arms from Germany, and who were opposed to Home Rule, who were opposed to the settlement that the British had offered the Irish Parliamentary Party in 1912. And then when the war broke out in 1914, that Home Rule, which would have given local government to Ireland limited powers, but independence nonetheless, which would have brought Ireland back to the point where it had been in the up to 1800, when the parliaments of both Dublin and Westminster were fused into one. So it was a step back, if you like, but also a step forward. It would have given Ireland some semblance of self-government, except there was huge resistance to that particular formula from the people in Northern Ireland, the Ulster Unionists, who were determined to keep Ireland firmly within the Union, yes, but also firmly sort of as part of an integrated sort of United Kingdom. In other words, they wanted the status quo. Now, if I just show you, I prepared these slides and I never use them. But let me just take a moment to show you one or two things that visually that make sense. That's the destruction, which I'll come back to, sort of following just 1 week of fighting in Dublin in 1916. And the British Prime Minister Asquith, who was the architect of the sort of Irish settlement of 1912, the Home Rule settlement, because, of course, Redmond held the balance of power after the second election. That was the leader of the Irish Parliamentary Party in 1910. And this cartoon shows that Redmond is leading the Liberal government, literally by the nose, towards Irish independence. And on the other side, of course, the Ulster Unionists, who are completely opposed to Home Rule and prepared to fight to prevent Home Rule from coming into being. So the leader of the Ulster Unionists, Lord Carson, who was actually a Dubliner, and the Solemn League and Covenant here being signed by the Solemn League and Covenant being signed by the Ulster Unionists against Home Rule, signed in their own blood, against the idea of Home Rule ever being implemented in Ireland. So you have two very polarized situations. You have legislation, which is in a sense providing for some modicum of Home Rule, which satisfies many, including John Redmond and the Irish Parliamentary Party, but not the IRB. And here you see we serve neither king nor Kaiser, the Liberty Hall, which is destroyed in the 1916 Rising. But in front of this, you can see the Irish Citizen Army armed and parading sort of between 1914 and 1916. And here, Owen MacNeill, Professor Owen MacNeill, professor in the university where Anne and I attended, Professor of Early Irish, is the leader of the Irish Volunteers, an organisation formed in 1913 in November 1913, again sort of with a view to protecting Ireland in some way from whatever danger. So you have the armed camp. And John Redmond, who had the majority of people supporting him in 1912 when the bill was passed, and who in 1914 dutifully encourages tens of thousands of Irish men and women to join the British forces, which they do. Some 200,000 people join in 1914, from 14 onwards. And the death toll is supposed to be 50,000, but in fact it's probably less than that. But when you take into account the number of people who died or at least who were wounded and invalided as a consequence of the war. But here you can see the sort of propaganda that was used to recruit Irish people into the war. This one here in particular, to the glory of Ireland, will you go or must I? In other words, women pressurizing men into joining, whereas there are many women, of course, who would not have taken that particular stance. And now Patrick Pearse, the commander of the 1916 Rising. Now, what I should explain here is that in 1914, when the war broke out, two things happened. The British did not implement Home Rule. They put it remained on the statute books, but it would be brought into being at the end of the war, and the war was only supposed to last 6 months. So everybody was supposed to be home by Christmas, like all wars. Everybody gets home by some festivity or other. It's never going to be sort of 4 years. It's never going to cost millions of lives or anything like that. It's going to be a short, sharp conflict. And Redmond probably believed that to be the case, that Home Rule would be on the statute books by 1915. In fact, it never came onto the statute books, except sort of in a very amended form and extended form in 1921-22. But Redmond in 1914, when he opted to send, to take part in the war, took most of the Irish volunteers, leaving Owen MacNeill with a small remnant of that organisation, a few thousand volunteers, maybe somewhat less than 20,000, whereas Redmond had taken more maybe 140,000. So the Irish volunteers were scaled down, and Redmond had taken the majority. MacNeill was left with a much smaller number. But what that did was, with the smaller Irish volunteers under Owen MacNeill, it gave the IRB an opportunity to infiltrate that organisation and control the volunteers in a much greater way than they would have done if in fact the volunteers had remained united. So this conspiratorial group, the IRB, handpicked its members, and Patrick Pearse was one of those unlikely members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, this oath-bound organisation, because Patrick Pearse, the teacher, the educationalist, the great educational reformer, the Gaelic League activist, the journalist, the barrister, had also been a home ruler, and the IRB had to pick him very carefully when they were assured that his ideas had become more advanced. And they wanted him because of his public profile. Clark had spent 15 years in jail. He did not have the charismatic personality of Patrick Pearse, and they needed Pearse. They particularly needed Pearse for his oratory and for his public, for his capacity to speak in public. And Clark, when they set aside his prior record as a supporter of Home Rule, saw the advantages of his being a member, and he became a member, recruited by Eamon Bulfin, whom I spoke about here last week. Eamon Bulfin, who was born in Argentina in 1892, who had come back to Ireland in 1902, but had been a student in Pearse's school, St. Enda's, and incidentally in the Southern Cross, up to the Easter week 1916, there was an advertisement for St. Enda's in the Southern Cross, in other words, recruiting people to go to St. Enda's in Ireland. But Clark, when he recruited Pearse, gave him his lead or his head at the funeral of O'Donovan Rossa, the great Fenian leader who was taken back from the United States. His remains, or at least he was buried in Glasnevin Cemetery in a Munster funeral, because funerals were a very important institution by which it was possible to say things that we wouldn't normally say because of censorship, the severe censorship in Ireland during the war. Hence, at the funeral of O'Donovan Rossa in 1915, Pearse gave the graveside oration. And Clark, who was the leader of the IRB, told Pearse to give them, hell, in other words, to speak in a very inflamed way. And that's when he said, the fools, they have left us our Fenian dead. And when Ireland holds these graves, Ireland unfree shall never be peace. Those were the words that we learned as school children, as I'm sure you learned patriotic poems about Argentina in your school days. So the Irish Revolution of 1916 was planned with skill. The leadership was cohesive, and those leading the organisation were talented recruiters. The old problem of infiltration by Dublin Castle, that is the centre of British administration in Ireland, was countered but not eliminated, because prior to the 1916 Rising, April 1916, the British police had infiltrated the IRB and knew the time and the day of the Rising. The British also knew the time and the day of the Rising because they had intercepted diplomatic dispatches from Berlin to the German embassy in Washington, and they knew precisely when the Rising was going to take place. The question is, why didn't they stop it? So much depended on outside support for this Rising. This was not going to be one of the risings of the 19th century, which was really gesture politics or gesture revolutionary politics. Much depended for support on if the Rising was to be successful, they needed international support. And this came from the United States, from the IOB in the United States, and from the connections that the revolutionary leaders in Ireland had through the IOB and other organisations with the leadership in the United States. It also came through Roger Casement, that great sort of humanitarian who exposed the crimes of various companies in the Putumayo area and in Brazil and in Peru earlier in the century, had become a convinced revolutionary nationalist and had gone to Germany to elicit support from the German government for the Rising in Ireland. It was not a question of what if, but some IOB leaders, particularly Joseph Mary Plunkett, expected practical military help from Germany. And that was a firm basis on which to launch a revolution. Joseph Mary Plunkett was a poet. He was suffering from consumption, what we would know was TB. In other words, he was dying at the time of the Rising, but he was sort of perhaps the major military strategist of the 1916 Rising, and he was a poet and a good military strategist. Joseph Mary Plunkett, who was one of the executed leaders of the Rising, expected the following. They expected a major arms shipment from Germany. The Germans were going to send a major arms shipment to Dublin. The fulfillment of a request for German officers to lead the revolution in Ireland on Easter week. And he also hoped for, and Casement in Berlin worked towards, getting the German government to dispatch a U-boat to Dublin Bay, so that when the Rising took place, and the British were sending reinforcements from Britain to Ireland, that this U-boat would be able to disrupt their sending of troops and supplies to Dublin. These were perhaps utopian expectations, but they were nonetheless regarded as being realistic in the run-up to the Rising in 1916. In fact, the Germans did dispatch a consignment of arms, which unfortunately was about to be intercepted by the British on Good Friday 1916, that is 2 days before the Rising was supposed to take place, and the captain of the ship, the Aud, scuttled it rather than allow the British to board, and the arms for the Easter Rising sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. No submarine was ever dispatched, but Roger Casement was taken back to Ireland just on the weekend of the Rising by U-boat, by German submarine, and he landed in Ballystrand, but was immediately arrested and taken to London, where he was tried and then executed. The final leader of the 1916 Rising to be executed on the 3rd of August 1916, hanged for treason. But even in the form that it took, the scaled down version of the Rising, centred in Dublin rather than sort of generally throughout the country, and with no practical German support, the Rising posed a significant military challenge to a British government asleep at the wheel. You know that expression, to be not fully sort of aware of what's going on, because they had the intelligence, they had the information, and they were planning, I think, to arrest all the leaders the following week, and the Irish, being the cunning and untrustworthy people that we are, actually had a rising before the British were sent out there, people to arrest the leaders. The Rising, in my view, was no ritual blood sacrifice, although it was associated with Easter Sunday, the resurrection, etc. But it was no ritual blood sacrifice. It was no futile action foredoomed to failure. For the IOP leadership, it was an action designed to change the course of Irish history, and that is what it did. Lasting only 6 days, its aftermath produced a revolutionary democratic consequence, which shaped the future government of Ireland and the history of the island. The Rising, and here I'll show you Margaret Pearse, who's the mother of Cormac Pearse, and plays an important part in the formation of her two sons, Cormac Pearse and Willie Pearse, the younger son, who is a sculptor and a good one, and a teacher in St. Edmunds. Both of them are executed on one on the 3rd of May and the other on the 4th of May 1916. And here you have Cormac Pearse to the right of the priest, who is about to give his oration at the funeral of Honourable Rossa. These are the leaders of the Rising, the signatories of the proclamation, and here are the British senior officials in Ireland who, as I said, fell asleep at the wheel during Easter week 1916. Lord Birrell, the Chief Secretary, and his assistant, Sir Matthew Nathan, who was in Dublin Castle when the Rising broke out. William Birrell was back at home having a rest when he should have been in Dublin. And here, the proclamation, which was read by Patrick Pearse at the not on the steps, because there are no steps on the GPO, but outside the GPO, under the portico of the GPO in 1916. And you may or may not be familiar with the text, but it is a very progressive text, and in a sense the foundation document for the new Irish state. And that in the name of God and of the dead generations, the beginning. This document was written by Patrick Pearse and also by the socialist James Connolly and by Dermot
Major General Maxwell, it was the officer taken, at least sent to Ireland in Easter week after the Rising to deal with the repression, and talk about that now briefly. Let me just give you the scale of the Rising in terms of numbers of people killed, because in a nutshell, what happened: the Rising was postponed from Easter Sunday to Easter Monday. Owen MacNeill had sent out a countermanding order, which appeared in all of that as countermanding order to mobilise and come to Dublin on Easter Sunday 1916. Owen MacNeill had placed an ad in the newspaper, the Sunday Independent, and sent people to demonstraries throughout the country to stop the Rising from taking place, because he felt it was going to be a disaster, particularly after the failure of the Germans to supply arms to the revolutionaries. In the Rising, now we estimate, the latest estimate is 485 deaths, 184 civilians. So the majority of those who died in the Rising were civilians. 107 British soldiers. But British soldiers, some of whom were Irish, but were serving in a British uniform. 58 revolutionaries or insurgents. 13 policemen, probably members of the Dublin Metropolitan Police, all Irish. 15 leaders, including Thomas Kent. There were pockets of resistance outside Dublin, and one of those armed encounters took place in Cork, and a man called Thomas Kent in his farmhouse. The most revolutionary person in the farmhouse was the mother, who was 86, who loaded the guns to stop to repel the RIC, who were trying to take her sons. Thomas Kent was one of 2 sons arrested, and he was executed. Recently, his remains were found buried in quicklime in the courtyard, or in the parade ground of the barracks in Cork, and he was disinterred and reburied in his home village just north of Cork City. And there were 15 leaders. The leaders were executed, including, as I say, Thomas Kent and Roger Casement, who was hanged in Brixton on the 3rd of August 1916. Now, how would it be possible to maintain the support of the Catholic Church in a revolutionary situation such as this? Let me try and answer that question very quickly, but let me just show you, in a sense, Major General Maxwell, who was a classical sort of officer sent to quell a rising, and he got a free hand during Easter week. He wasn't there for the Rising, but he came in during Easter week, took control of the military forces. The British had sent in large numbers quickly had to deploy large numbers of troops from Britain. Many of them very sort of inexperienced, some of them with no experience at all, and they were mowed down. In one particular episode on Easter Tuesday, Easter Wednesday, when they came from the boat in Dunleary, they were just shot like fish in a barrel by the revolutionaries. The Rising and the strategy of the revolutionaries was to take the General Post Office. You can see there, sort of in a form that resulted from some heavy-handedness by the British. In other words, the shelling of the GPO. The object, with a small force of men and women in 1916, was to take key installations in Dublin and to force the British government to basically, you can see it. That's much better. Excuse me, my voice is disintegrating. The object was to take, so they took the College of Surgeons, they all could have taken Dublin Castle, but they didn't know there were only a handful of people in Dublin Castle, which was the main centre of British administration in Dublin. There was a skirmish at the gates of Dublin Castle and a policeman was shot dead. But they could have taken the castle, but they didn't because they thought it was heavily armed, heavily protected. Now, what had happened was on Easter Sunday, Easter Monday, it was like all places. The administration had gone on leave, and the army presence in Dublin was British army presence was very light. So that was the reason the revolution took place on Easter Monday, 1916. And many of the officers, British officers, on Easter Monday, the day of the Rising, had gone down to Fairyhouse to the races. So, in mobilising people to resist the Rising on Easter Monday, it was particularly difficult because these people were on leave, they were out of their positions, and they had to be recalled in a hurried way. So, the British response in the first instance, when the IRB and the Irish volunteers dug in, was very, very limp. And it was only sort of on Easter Tuesday, Easter Wednesday, when the British really began to get their forces together. But once they did so, the rebels had no artillery, they had sort of small arms, but they were dug in to a biscuit factory called Jacobs, to Stephen's Green, if any of you have been in Dublin, which was a stupid place to dig trenches, whereas they should have taken the higher ground in the Gresham Hotel, but they did take the College of Surgeons, and that was difficult for them to dislodge themselves from these particular places. So the difficulty for the British was they couldn't simply concentrate all their forces on one area. They had to, in a sense, deploy their forces to deal with the rebels in about 7 or 8 different locations, and that was one of the reasons why the rebels were in a position to resist until Easter, until the Saturday following Easter Monday. So you can see here that once this is the GPO, the General Bus Office, which was the headquarters of the Rising, and it was held until Easter Friday, until the Friday of Easter week, and then they retreated down to Moore Street, down Henry Street, and regrouped, and then Pearce gave the surrender order when, in fact, he became aware of the way in which civilians were being killed during the Rising. And the British forces used very heavy hand and did not discriminate, certainly inside King Street, where there were a number of civilians killed, as they tried to sort of get a position of advantage to take the four courts from the rebels, which was the centre of British justice in Ireland. Here you can see, picking over the Rising, you can see the devastation. I tried to get a photograph of the O'Connell Street prior to the reordering of the street by the British, but I didn't succeed last night. But here you can see the devastation. It was the British used superior forces to do this. Look at the complete devastation. Nelson Spiller, which was blown up by the IRA in the mid-1960s, it's no longer there. But look at the devastation on either side. And this is the last woman, because I don't have time to talk about women in the revolution as such. Elizabeth O'Farrell was the nurse, one of the nurses who served throughout Easter week, tending to the wounds of those of the garrison. And she accompanied Pearce. I may have showed this before, I don't know. She accompanied Pearce. You can see on my right. If you look beyond, this is Porrick Pearce with the hat. Here, this is Porrick Pearce, and here's a picture of Pearce. But what's the difference between this picture and this picture? You can see here. Who's that? That's Agnes O'Farrell, the nurse, because she accompanied Pearce. But in a sense, in a kind of symbolic way, this photograph airbrushed her out of Irish history, literally. And it's now this generation that are trying to sort of reassert and reposition the role, the important role that women played, both in the military sense and in the sort of logistical sense of the rising. And here, I just want to show you a quotation from Eamon de Valera, who in Justify, this is later on, but it's a way of showing, in a sense, the flexibility of the Irish Catholic conscience when it came to revolution. Please give to the Holy Father my dutiful homage. Though nominally cut away from the body of Holy Church, they had been excommunicated during the Civil War. We are still spiritually and mystically of it, and we refuse to regard ourselves except as its children. So, by Easter Monday, by the following Saturday,